I was in a 24-hour convenience store in Seoul last Tuesday, the kind where the LED lights are so bright they feel surgical. Behind the counter was an automated kiosk, but restocking the shelves was a man who looked to be in his late 60s, moving with a practiced, weary precision. Outside, a group of young professionals stood under the neon glow, dressed in impeccable techwear, debating the merits of a new luxury micro-apartment that measured exactly 11 square meters. One of them held up his phone, showing a graph of South Korea's 0.58 fertility rate. He didn't look worried. He looked almost proud, as if the number were a high score in a game of collective endurance. "It's a reproductive strike," he said, tapping the glass. "Why would we bring a competitor into a room this small?" To him, choosing not to have a child wasn't a loss of hope. It was the only rational bargaining chip he had left against a social contract that demanded a lifetime of debt in exchange for a diminishing chance at dignity. But then the atmosphere shifted. A government notification flashed on the store's digital display, an update on the minimalist immigration pilot. Suddenly, the same young man who had been so clinical about his own strike turned bitter. He started gesturing at the delivery scooters outside, manned by foreign workers who had just arrived under the new quota. "They're just human patches," he muttered, "brought in to keep the subways running while we vanish." That jarring disconnect, the fierce pride in a shrinking nation mixed with the immediate resentment of the patches sent to save it, is the pulse of a civilizational gamble. It's the sound of a society that has become so efficient it has effectively engineered its own evolutionary dead end. We are witnessing a biological ultimatum play out in real time, where the world's most advanced city has become a gilded cage, and the only power left is the power to withdraw.
Wow, that's a chilling way to start. That term he used, reproductive strike. It just reframes the entire conversation, doesn't it?
It does. It takes it from being a passive demographic trend into an active, conscious decision, a form of protest almost.
Exactly. It's not we can't have kids, it's we won't have kids under these conditions. And that's a profoundly different statement.
And it really sets the stage for what we want to dig into today.
Yeah.
We see this number, 0.58, and it's thrown around in headlines, but it often feels abstract, just a decimal point.
Yeah.
But you've argued that it represents something, well, something unprecedented.
I mean, to put it into stark biological terms, the replacement rate for a stable population is 2.1 children per wed. That's 2 to replace the parents and a little extra to account for mortality.
Right, 2.1, we hear that number a lot.
So when a country drops to, say, 1.5, like many in Europe, it's a serious problem. The population shrinks, but 0.58, it's not a gentle decline, it's a cliff. It's a demographic freefall.
Can you break down the math on that? What does that actually look like over a couple of generations?
Sure. Let's make it simple. Imagine you have a room with 100 young people today, 100 potential parents. In the next generation, at a rate of 0.58, they will produce, well, fewer than 30 children. Let's say 29.
So the room is already down by more than 2/3.
Instantly. Now, let's wait for that next generation to grow up. Those 29 children at the same rate will produce around 8 or 9 grandchildren of the original group.
100 people become 9 in 60 years.
From 100 to 9. You're talking about a generation shrinking to less than a tenth the size of their grandparents' generation. There is no historical precedent for this in a modern, peaceful, and prosperous nation. We've only seen contractions like this during, catastrophic wars or literal plagues.
It's a biological ultimatum. And that guy in the store, he seemed to understand it not just as a crisis, but as a rational response.
Which is the terrifying part. He's not wrong.
And that's what we're going to unpack.
Yeah.
We've been looking at a lot of material on this, reports from the Korea Development Institute, sociological papers, news analyses, and it really seems to boil down to 3 interlocking pillars that are holding up this crisis.
It's a system.
First, there's the economic geography of Seoul itself, how the city is physically built to, in a way, prevent family formation. Second, this new minimalist immigration policy, which is this attempt to patch the demographic holes with what a guy called human patches.
A very technocratic solution to a very human problem.
And third, what seems to be the root of it all, the comparative failure of the entire Confucian capitalist social contract. The deal that was made a generation ago has been broken.
So we have the physical space, the external solution, and the internal spiritual crisis, the how, the who, and the why.
Exactly. So let's start with the first pillar, the Seoul Centrifuge. The city itself, that idea of an 11 square meter apartment is not a joke.
Well, it's a reality for a huge number of young professionals, the go-see one.
You know, it reminds me of a story I heard about a young researcher there. He's brilliant, works for a top urban planning consultancy. His entire job is to analyze data to make Seoul's transit and infrastructure even more efficient.
So he's literally building the machine.
He is the machine's architect, and he lives in a cozy one, a room that he describes as a bed with walls. He says he spends his days in these vast, hyper-efficient systems, subways that arrive to the second, data networks that are the fastest on Earth. But his personal life, his actual living space, has been compressed down to the bare minimum required for a human to sleep and recharge before the next shift.
Like a battery in a charging port?
And he said he had this moment, looking out his tiny window at the skyline, where he realized the city isn't built for humans. It's built for workers. It's an engine designed for maximum economic extraction. And in that design, there is simply no room for the inefficiency, the messiness, the space that family requires.
That's a perfect encapsulation of a concept we call spatial determinism.
Okay, unpack that for me. Spatial determinism.
It's the idea that our physical environment does more than just influence our choices. It can actually dictate them on a fundamental, almost biological level. You put any animal in a cage that is too small, that is too stressful, and its reproductive instinct shuts down. It's a survival mechanism.
And we think we're somehow above that.
We like to think we are, but we're not. When your personal space is barely large enough for you to exist, the thought of another person, a partner, let alone a crying, growing child, doesn't feel like a joy. It feels like an invasion, an existential threat to the little autonomy you have left.
The environment is preemptively making the decision for you.
Seoul is the ultimate paradox. It's a hyper-efficient trap. Everything is designed to get the most out of you during your productive hours, but that same efficiency has optimized away all the slack, all the breathing room, all the wasteful space that human life, and especially family life, actually needs to thrive.
But other huge cities exist. People have families in Tokyo, in London, in New York. The apartments are small there too. What makes Seoul's geography a uniquely effective contraceptive?
I think it's the sheer unbelievable concentration. The Seoul capital area, or SMA, is home to over half the entire country's population, 51 million people, and more than 26 million of them are crammed into one metro region.
That's a level of density that's hard to even imagine.
It creates a gravity well. All the best jobs, the best universities, the best opportunities are in Seoul, so everyone has to be there, which creates this ferocious zero-sum competition for every square inch of space. And that leads to what I found in this KDI report, what they call the commuting paradox.
Okay, this is the thing that I had to read 3 times because it seemed completely backwards. The report says that in central Seoul, having a shorter commute actually correlates with lower marriage rates.
It sounds totally wrong, doesn't it? You'd think, great, I'm home from work at 6 p.m., I have more time for a social life, for dating.
Right, more time equals more opportunity to meet someone.
But you have to ask the next question. Who are the people who can actually afford to live in central Seoul, close to the big corporate headquarters?
Either the super rich who are already established, or
young single professionals who are pouring an unsustainable percentage of their income, 50, 60%, sometimes more, into the rent for a tiny apartment. They're what we'd call house poor. They may have proximity to the office, they may have a bit more time on paper, but they have zero financial flexibility.
So they're delaying marriage not because they don't have time, but because they're broke. They're running on a hamster wheel just to pay the rent on their tiny box.
Exactly. Marriage, and especially children, looks like an impossible luxury, so they're career-focused out of necessity.
Okay, so that's trap A. What's trap B? The obvious solution is to move out to the periphery. Go to Gyeonggi province or Incheon, where housing is cheaper.
And millions do. But that's the other side of the paradox. The same data shows that once your commute from the periphery into Seoul goes over 60 minutes each way.
Let me guess. Fertility rates plummet.
They fall off a cliff. Because now you've traded the money problem for a time problem. You might have a slightly larger apartment, maybe even a spare room, but you're spending 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours a day on a crowded bus or subway.
You're just a ghost in your own home.
You've lost all of what we could call relationship equity. The energy and time required to maintain a strong partnership, let alone raise a child. You get home, you're exhausted, you eat, you sleep, you get up and do it again. The commute literally consumes the time that family life requires.
So the perfect catch-22. You can live near the center and be too broke for a family, or you can live on the edge and be too exhausted for a family. The geography gives you no winning move.
None. And the financial pressure is made even more acute by the housing system itself. We can't talk about this without talking about Jeonse.
Right. I've tried to understand this system before. It's not like renting in the West. It's something else entirely. Can you walk us through it?
It's unique to Korea. So instead of paying a monthly rent to a landlord, you, the tenant, provide a massive lump sum deposit. This deposit, the Jeonse, is typically somewhere between 60 and 80% of the actual market value of the property.
Wait. Let's just pause on that. If an apartment is valued at, say, $500,000, which is not unusual in Seoul, you're saying I have to hand over $300,000 or $400,000 in cash just to move in?
Yes, upfront. The deal is that the landlord then takes that huge pool of capital and invests it in stocks, in another property, whatever. They live off the returns from that investment. And then, at the end of your 2-year contract, they are supposed to give you your entire deposit back.
Okay, so in theory, you live rent-free for 2 years. But the obvious question is, what young person has $400,000 sitting in the bank?
Absolutely no one. And that's the core of the problem. To come up with the Jeonse deposit, young people and families have to take out massive bank loans. So while they aren't paying rent to a landlord, they're paying huge amounts of interest to a bank.
So it's just a mortgage for a place you don't even own.
Actually. And here's the real kicker. Because property values in Seoul have been skyrocketing, every time your 2-year lease is up for renewal, the landlord comes back and says, well, the apartment is worth 20% more now, so I need you to increase your Jeonse deposit by another $80,000.
And if you can't come up with it, if the bank won't give you a bigger loan?
You're out. You have to move. It creates this constant grinding instability. How can you possibly put down roots? How can you decide to bring a child into a home when you have no idea if you can afford to live there in 24 months?
It's like living on a financial knife's edge, constantly.
And the data on this is crystal clear. One of the reports we looked at from the Mail Business News drew a direct causal line. For every 10% increase in average Jeonse prices in the Seoul area, there is a measurable corresponding decrease in the total fertility rate. It's almost 1-to-1.
It financially punishes family formation in real time.
It does. And this intense financial pressure forces a strategic shift in how parents think about children. This is where the economist Gary Becker's model becomes incredibly relevant.
The quantity versus quality trade-off.
In a less developed, maybe agricultural economy, you want a quantity of children. You need more hands to work the farm. The investment per child is relatively low.
More kids equals more labor.
But in a hyper-competitive, high-tech knowledge economy like South Korea's, human capital is everything. The quality of the child, their education, their skills, their credentials becomes the sole determinant of their future success.
You're not just raising a child, you're developing a high-value asset.
It's a brutal way to put it, but from a purely economic perspective, yes. Parents feel they have to make an enormous investment in just one child to give them even a fighting chance.
This is the education industrial complex we hear so much about, right? The Hagwons.
It's an arms race. From the age of 3 or 4, children are in private, after-school academies, or Hagwons, for everything. English, math, piano, coding. The pressure to get into one of the top 3 SKY universities, Seoul National, Korea, or Jeonse, is all-consuming.
Because if you don't get into one of those, your chances of getting a good job at a cable like Samsung or Hyundai are
close to 0. Yeah. So parents see it as their duty to pour every single resource they have into that one child. If they were to split those resources between 2 or 3 children, they feel that none of them would be competitive enough to survive.
So this 0.58 number, it's not apathy. It's not people deciding they don't like children. It's the rational economic output of a system that has made the cost of entry for a single successful life astronomically high.
It is the only rational move left in the game for many. And this brings us full circle to that man in the convenience store. His statement, why would we bring a competitor into a room this small? Wasn't just about the physical room. It was about the tiny, suffocating room for error in the entire economy.
He's not just on strike against the government. He's on strike against the entire system.
Yes, but of course, the system has to keep running. The GDP has to grow. The subways need to be maintained. The elderly need to be cared for. And if the native population goes on reproductive strike, the state has only one option left.
To find someone else to do the work. Which brings us to the second pillar, this minimalist immigration policy.
The human patch.
Yeah. And this part, honestly, it feels even more fraught with tension. I was reading through some online community posts from a town in Gyeonggi-do, one of these industrial suburbs outside Seoul.
Aww.
And the descriptions were stark.
So,
One person described his weekly trip to the local supermarket. He said on Saturday afternoons, the place is divided by an invisible line. On one side, you had the elderly Korean residents moving slowly, shopping for the week. And on the other side, you have these groups of young migrant workers, mostly from Southeast Asia. But he said they don't interact at all. The migrant workers move together, they speak quietly in their own language, they buy their things, and they leave. There's no eye contact, no mixing. He called it psychological segregation. They are physically present, keeping the local factories running, but socially, they are completely invisible.
like ghosts running the machinery.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And his closing thought was, I understand our country needs them, but can a society truly survive if it treats its rescuers as permanent strangers?
And that is the billion-dollar question at the heart of South Korea's immigration strategy. The government is attempting something incredibly difficult, something that, frankly, has never really worked long-term anywhere else.
Which is what?
They're trying to import the labor without importing the people. They want hands, not humans. Yeah. The official policy name is a pilot program, but the philosophy behind it is what we're calling minimalist immigration.
It's a surgical, technocratic intervention, not a cultural opening.
The goal is labor intake without social integration. The framework documents we've seen on global Korea as a developmental policy don't talk about multiculturalism in the way a country like Canada might. They talk about foreigners as economic units to maintain national competitiveness.
So there's a hierarchy to this. It's not just one group of foreigners.
Oh, absolutely not. It's a very clearly defined caste system. Mm-hmm. At the very top, of course, are the native-born Korean nationals. They're the core.
Tier 1.
Tier 2, and this is crucial, are the co-ethnic foreign nationals. These are the Jeonse from China or the Koryoseram from post-Soviet states. They are ethnically Korean, and because of this shared bloodline, they are given preferential treatment and easier paths to residency.
So blood is the first filter.
Blood is the first and most important filter. Below them, in Tier 3, you have your high-skilled residents, the engineers, the professors, the researchers. They are actively courted for a brain gain to keep Korea at the cutting edge. Then you have marriage migrants, mostly women from countries like Vietnam and the Philippines who marry Korean men, often in rural areas. They are tolerated, primarily because their function is reproductive. They are there to have Korean children and care for their in-laws.
And then at the very bottom of this pyramid
are the migrant workers, the men on the construction sites, the women in the factories, the delivery drivers on the scooters. They are the patches. They are on highly restrictive visas, legally tied to a single employer. If they lose or quit that job, they are typically deported. There's virtually no pathway to permanent residency or citizenship for them.
It sounds a lot like the kafala system in the Middle East.
It has many similarities. It creates a massive power imbalance and a permanently temporary underclass. And this entire fragile system is about to collide with an oncoming demographic tidal wave, the elder care crisis.
I saw the numbers in that Korea Times report. They are projecting a shortfall of 116,000 professional care workers by 2028. That's just a few years away.
And that's a conservative estimate. The reality on the ground is already dire. Nursing homes across the country have empty beds that they cannot fill, despite having long waiting lists of desperate families, simply because they cannot find staff.
So the government's answer is naturally to bring in foreign care workers under this low-skilled migrant worker visa.
But this is where the policy's cold logic slams into the warm, messy reality of human care. Caregiving, especially for the elderly in Korea, is an intensely high-context job.
What do you mean by high context?
It means that most of the important communication is nonverbal. It's based on a shared cultural understanding. It's the concept of nunchi, literally eye measure, the ability to read a room, to understand unspoken needs, to navigate complex hierarchies of respect based on age.
So when an elderly person says, "Don't worry about me, I'm fine," it might actually mean...
It might mean, "I'm lonely and I need you to show you care by insisting on helping me." An outsider, trained to take words at face value, could easily miss that cue, leading the elder to feel neglected or disrespected. It's a cultural minefield.
And you can't teach a lifetime of cultural nuance in a 6-week training program.
You can't. So what you end up with is an environment focused on compliance over care. The foreign worker, terrified of losing their visa if there's a complaint, focuses on ticking the boxes. Was the patient bathed, fed, given their medicine? But the crucial element of human connection is lost. It becomes a sterile, mechanical process.
Which feeds back into this larger identity crisis, the whole idea of minjok.
Yes, minjok. It's a powerful and complicated word. It means the people or the nation, but it's deeply rooted in the idea of a shared bloodline of ethnic homogeneity. For the last 70 years, this idea of one people, one blood was a source of incredible strength. It fueled the miracle on the Han River.
It was an identity fortress that helped them rebuild after the war.
It absolutely was. It created immense social cohesion and a capacity for collective sacrifice. But the fortress that once protected them has now become a demographic prison. You cannot maintain a myth of ethnic purity while simultaneously facing a reality that requires millions of foreigners to keep your society functioning.
The myth is colliding with the math.
And the result is the psychological segregation we talked about. Physical proximity, but total social distance. It's creating this permanent underclass that will clean the offices, care for the sick, and build the apartment buildings, but will never be considered part of the national family. They're not invited to the table.
And for the young Koreans on their reproductive strike, seeing this happen must be incredibly radicalizing.
Because they see the state's solution is not to fix the underlying problems that made them stop having children, the housing costs, the competition, the work culture. The solution is just to replace them with cheaper, more compliant labor from abroad.
It confirms their deepest cynicism, that the system values economic output above the well-being of its own citizens.
It proves their point. It validates the strike.
Which brings us to the third pillar, the deepest layer of this crisis, the why. The complete breakdown of the social contract. Why has this generation, the most educated and prosperous in Korean history, collectively decided to say no more?
I think to really grasp the depth of this collapse, the most useful thing to do is to compare Korea's situation directly with Japan.
Right. They're often lumped together as aging, low fertility societies, but their paths are actually very different.
Very different. I find it helpful to imagine a conversation between two retirees. One is sitting on a bench in Busan, Korea, and the other is in a park in Osaka, Japan. They're both in their 70s. They both lived through the post-war economic miracles. They both subscribe to the same fundamental deal.
The Confucian capitalist social contract.
Exactly. The deal was you give your life to the company, you work grueling hours, you sacrifice your personal life for the collective good, and in return, the system provides you with lifetime employment, a stable pension, rising status, and the ability to form a family and ensure its continuity. You endure, and you are rewarded.
But the view from the park bench in Osaka is different from the one in Busan.
Radically different. The retiree in Japan is witnessing what you might call an elegant decline.
An elegant decline. What does that look like?
Japan's fertility rate is also low, around 1.3, but it's been down there for a long time. The decline has been gradual, a slow, managed descent. Society has had time to adapt. They are investing heavily in automation and robotics to replace workers. There's a national consensus, a sense of resignation perhaps, but not a sense of panic or betrayal.
So it's a managed, quiet shrinking.
But the retiree in Busan is witnessing a volatile shock. The speed of the change in Korea is what makes it so traumatic. You have to remember, as recently as 1960, the average Korean woman had 6 children.
6.
From 6 to 0.58 in the span of a single human lifetime. That is an almost instantaneous societal transformation. It's demographic whiplash. The social structures couldn't possibly keep up.
And for the younger generation, the deal their parents and grandparents made is now completely off the table.
It's not just off the table, it feels like a scam. The reward has vanished. The young generation today is, by any objective measure, more qualified than any before it. But they face a brutal job market, precarious employment, and the techware poverty we talked about. They work just as hard, but the promise of stability is gone.
The contract was breached.
The contract was utterly shattered. And that's why you see this strange sentiment online, which you mentioned earlier. I saw the same thread on Reddit where young Koreans were talking about the 0.58 fertility rate, not as a source of national shame, but as a high score.
Like it's a video game of endurance.
Exactly. It's this incredibly dark, perverse pride. The thinking is, our society is so punishing, so competitive, so fundamentally broken that we have achieved the lowest birth rate in human history. Look how tough we are to even survive this. It's a testament to the resilience in a failed system.
And in that context, the government's plea to have children for the nation must sound insulting.
It sounds like a joke. The nation already rose. Samsung, Hyundai, LG, they won. K-pop and Korean cinema have conquered the world. The nation succeeded, but the people feel like they were the fuel that was burned to power the rocket, and now they're being left behind.
We'd burned all the furniture to heat the house, and now the fire's out, and there's nowhere left to sit.
A perfect analogy. And that's why this is a true strike. A labor strike is the withdrawal of work to force a negotiation. This reproductive strike is the withdrawal of the future workforce itself. It's the ultimate bargaining chip. They are implicitly saying, we will not provide the next generation of cogs for this machine until you fundamentally change the nature of the machine.
This is where that idea of tragic dignity comes in, isn't it?
It reframes the entire phenomenon. It's not a story of failure or selfishness or millennial apathy. It's a story of agency. It's a population deciding that in a gilded cage, the only freedom left is the freedom not to procreate, the freedom not to subject another human being to the same race.
So the system, in its relentless pursuit of efficiency, has become so successful that it is optimizing the human being out of its own future.
It is the ultimate tragic success of the system. It works too well. And that's why immigration is just a patch. It's a temporary fix that doesn't address the root cause, which is the profound unhappiness and alienation of the population itself. You can import workers, but you can't import a will to live. You can't import a future.
So as we wrap this up, we've journeyed from the tiny Gozwan, this box built for a worker, to the silent, segregated supermarkets of Jeonse, to this profound collapse of the national promise. It feels incredibly bleak.
It is bleak, but I think Korea's situation serves as a critical warning. It's the canary in the coal mine for hypercapitalism. It's a real-time experiment showing what happens when a society relentlessly prioritizes economic metrics over human well-being.
The question isn't just how do we raise the birth rate anymore?
No. The question has to become more fundamental. What is an economy actually for? Is its purpose simply to generate ever-increasing GDP, to make a line on a graph go up? Or is it to create the conditions for a stable, meaningful, and sustainable human life?
Because if the line goes up but the people vanish, the line becomes meaningless.
Utterly meaningless.
I keep coming back to that opening image. Standing on a street in Seoul at 2 a.m, the neon signs are still blazing, the architecture's futuristic, the technology feels like it's from tomorrow. But the streets are eerily quiet. And the few people you see are an elderly man sweeping the pavement or a 70-year-old security guard watching over an empty office tower.
That's the visual signature of the collapse.
It's not the image of poverty. It's the image of wealth without people, of a machine humming along perfectly long after its purpose has been forgotten. It is a sleek, silent, and profoundly efficient road to a demographic void.